In today's video, we're going to show you how to do something that we all want more of, and that's how to get more open at impact. We're going to do that in 4 simple steps. The first step is going to be getting the golf club in position. Next, you're going to have the arms in the correct position. Finally, the spine, and then to top it all off, getting the knees in the right position. You do all those, we're going to show you those steps, you will be more open. So Shaun, the first step is getting the club in position, right? If this club is out of position when you start down, you don't have a reason to rotate. In fact, you have an incentive not to rotate. And that's what we see golfers every day. Everybody wants to be more open, but they're having the club in a position where if you did get open, you did move the hips more, the shoulders more open, you'd hit it worse. And no one wants to do that.
Exactly. You have to kind of back your way into getting open, right? So the trick to it is to get this club in a real playable spot here, about halfway down, where the face of the club here is straight up and down.
So show the down the line here view. So what you're talking about is when this club is kind of resting, the club head is kind of resting on his back line, you want this leading edge to be pretty vertical. That would be too open, that would be too shut. If you can get pretty vertical and kind of behind the hands there, right? It's when it's above the hands, you want the club head behind the hands.
Exactly right.
If you're in that spot there, now you're starting to create that reason to rotate.
Yeah, it's in a spot where if I do rotate, it brings the club out in front of me the way it's supposed to, and I'm going to have my body more open at impact. Now, the question is, well, how do I do all that, right? So, we always say if you're not using feedback, you're just exercising. So one thing you can do is obviously just film your swing, slow it down, and try to get the face of the club pointed straight up and down here. The other thing to do, though, to really practice it with a drill is you can just take a tee, stick it in the end of the club, and make some slow swings and stop here about halfway down and make sure this tee points somewhere near the target line. If you can do that and get the leading edge here straight up and down, that'll give you a good spot to where you can start opening the body and hit some solid shots.
Let's go back to that again.
Sure.
Go down the line, and at minimum, you want this tee pointing somewhere at the ball or even slightly above the ball.
Right.
We don't want it pointing inside the ball.
And you don't need it in this crazy position.
You don't need it there.
Trying to do also.
Right. So by getting the face in the right spot, that vertical score line, and getting the pitch of the club right, now you've got the club in position to rotate. And you have a reason to rotate rather than a reason not to rotate in your downswing. All right, the second step. So we got the club in position now. Now we want to make sure the arms are in position. And this is also, it's kind of 1A and 1B, because this is also going to help you get the club in position by making sure you know how to position the arms in the downswing.
Yeah, exactly right. And this causes a lot of confusion because there's so much conflicting information out there, right, about what to do from the top. So the way to do this correctly is once you get to the top, if your body didn't move, let's just say you were frozen and the only thing you could move is your arms actually have to lower down behind you, right? So the path of the hands and the arms is more of a downward trajectory. Now, if you do that, that's going to give you a reason, again, just like we talked about in the first step, it's going to give you a reason to open up to get the club and the arms back out in front of you.
Right.
If you're at the top of the swing and you have a tendency to put your hands on the ball, now if I turn from here, I'm going to hit it so far left, I'm never going to play golf again.
And this is really where a lot of this confusion stems from the 3D world, right? We capture a lot of swings on 3D compared to the 2D world, which is what you're watching us now on. The camera will create an illusion. We've all seen videos of great players where the hands are out here, the club's back. And it makes sense to say, okay, in my downswing, I got to get my hands out here. But that's not how that position is created.
Exactly.
So let's go back to what you just showed, because this is key.
Yeah.
So let's get you right at address.
Okay.
So if you don't turn in the backswing, show me what the arms do.
If I didn't turn in the backswing.
If you didn't turn in the backswing, right there. So we've got some lift, even if you don't even turn that much. So we've got some lift to this arm, right?
Yep.
So let's go back to address.
Yep.
Right, so this arm lifts.
Yep.
Right there, now let's turn. Now if you don't turn in the downswing, the opposite happens. The arm lowers.
It lowers down and the club head lowers down. And the only way from there to get to the ball would be to
turn.
To
so
get
again,
nice
we want to create all these reasons to rotate, right? So let's do that from face on now, because this is what really connects the dots.
Okay.
So you're going to take the club up, and lower the arms just like they lifted in the backswing. Now from here, this is where the hands are at impact. Okay, they're off the trail hip. Now you're just going to bring that around.
Look, if I let my hips open and let my shoulders get square, basically, get the back of the left wrist point at the target, that's about as good as it gets right there.
Right, so now if you don't do that, right, you ain't going to get the club to the ball. So now the rotation has to be there to hit the ball.
Absolutely correct.
Rather than coming this way, and now if I rotate, now I'm really penalized because the club's not getting down to the ground.
That's what makes the game so hard. When you look at something on video, you see a position, but you got to know how to create that. You almost have to reverse engineer it to get it correct.
Right, and this is one of those things where the best drill, the best way to learn how to do this is by doing it correctly. So make your backswing turn.
Yep.
Keep your shoulders, hips, everything where they are, and put your arms in position for impact.
Yeah, and I don't want to make a point here. We hear a lot of people worried about pulling down. Well, pulling down is getting narrow and letting your arms kind of separate like that. That would steepen it. We're not talking about that. We're talking about maintaining width, lowering the upper arm of the chest, unfolding the elbow angle, right? And then the wrist unhinge in that order. If I do that in that order, as I'm turning and shifting, that's about as good as it gets for a downswing.
Right, so lowering the arm is literally lowering this tricep area back here as the arm's straightening. Now it's not this way.
Nope.
Right? And the biggest difference we see between pros and AMs is the pros are lowering this bicep arm more than they lift it in the backswing from top to left arm parallel. The AMs are going half that and rotating it like this.
Yeah.
Right, so that's the steepener. When golfers try to pull the arms down, they pull it like this.
Or, yeah, and like you said, they might narrow it at the same time.
Narrow it down and do one of these. So there's lowering. You can't get around it if you want to have a great golf swing. It's when you do it and how you do it that makes all the difference. All right, so our third step is making sure our spine is in the right spot so we can rotate, right? If I want to rotate as much as I physically can, I'm going to keep my spine neutral, right, and rotate. Now, if I want to restrict that, I'll tilt way over here. That rotation becomes very difficult to do. So we see a lot of golfers in an effort maybe to shallow the club, get the spine out of position that actually hinders them from rotating and keeps them from rotating.
Yeah, that's a good point. So like Mike is saying, let's say this represents my spine, right? If I get to the top and it's pretty neutral and I really start to kind of slide the hip forward to shallow this club, very difficult to get open from there because the turning motion doesn't really put me in the right direction.
Right, and so it's so in to out that it becomes almost impossible to do correctly. Now, a lot of golfers will get in that position because, again, they're not trying to lower the arms, they're trying to keep them up, and the club's got to get to the ground, so I'll get to the ground just by tilting. Now rotation becomes infinitely more difficult. So this dovetails perfectly with our first two steps. It's getting this spine neutral. So let's talk about how we can make sure the spine's neutral and what to look for.
Yeah, so let's say I get to the top of the swing. I've got my upper and lower body pretty much over each other. I might be leaning this way just slightly.
Yeah, so your back line's not going to be vertical. It's going to have a slight tilt to it.
A little bit. That helps kind of with the first move down, with the hands coming
Right.
downward instead of out. The trick to this is, as I start shifting forward and unwinding, I want to keep the buttons of my shirt kind of over top of my belt buckle till right about here. So let's say I've got 70% of my pressure and weight on my left foot. I've got the hands at waist high, and you can see I'm fairly neutral right here. That gives me the best chance, as long as the other first two things are in place, for me to start straightening this leg out, letting the hips open, and that will get my upper body a little bit of tilt, like you see every great player at impact. They actually back a little, but it's the when that happens that allows you to get open.
That's exactly right. So as those arms are lowering, right, as the club's getting in position, you don't want to undo all that by throwing the spine out to the right, or some golfers will even actually see throw it to the left.
That's a good point. So let's say I'm here and I'm trying to get on top of the ball maybe, because you hear that a lot, and I lean this way a little bit. Well, now I'm definitely not going to open up, even if the club's in a pretty good spot.
No, it's going to be super steep.
Exactly, because now you always have to look at what position is my body in and how is that affecting the direction when I actually do turn. So if I'm leaning this way and I turn, that's a really big steeper.
Let's look at that from down the line.
So so it's very deceptive, right? The club's in a pretty good spot, and I'm leaned left from Mike's perspective. Now, if I really turn the rotation on here, it kicks the club so far out it's unplayable.
You'll have to try to do all sorts of things with the hands and wrists that'll just physically difficult to do, and it's not necessary.
No,
so
it's not.
Keep that spine neutral. That's going to be your best place to rotate from once you get the club, arms in positions. And now you got a neutral spine to match it. Now let's look at the final step. All right, so step 4, the final piece to this puzzle is making sure you're moving the knees correctly. So kind of the overriding theme with this is the worst way to try to get open is just trying to twist open. You're going to make sure the club's in position, the arm's in position, the spine's in position, so now you can move the knees correctly. That's what moves the hips.
And this is a big one, and we see it a lot in golf lessons, people really trying to spin. Usually their hips back up, their legs might lock kind of straight, very awkward, and doesn't really get you open at all.
Right.
Right, you might, but it really affects the club position in a negative way. So let's get back into that position again. Club face in a good spot, club angled correctly, my spine's neutral, right? We're in a good spot here. From there, what you want to feel, you're already on your left foot as far as your weight's concerned, your knees, let's say they're the same right here at delivery position. I'm going to keep letting my left knee straighten and my right knee bend. So we see in gears a differential between good players' knee bends, right? At impact. So that's very critical because if the knees change, it automatically helps allow the hips to open correctly. If your knees don't change, and you're trying to lock this leg back to maybe avoid early extension or something, it becomes very difficult and can be painful to even try to crank your hips open.
You touched on a couple really key points there. So when we look at our database and we look at all the golfers who have driver club head speeds over 120 miles an hour, so the fastest of the fast, right, on tour, their pelvis lowers in the downswing. So we hear the squat all the time. We see guys trying to do the squat all the time. Their pelvis lowers less than 3/8 of an inch. Where you get that look from is that this left side is lower in the backswing. This left knee's bent more. I'm now starting to straighten this as this one's bending. So now it looks like I've squatted, but it's actually this leg is coming back out. This leg is going down. At a certain point, kind of mid downswing, the knees cross. They're actually the same flex as they're moving from one straightening and one bending. That's what produces the look. That's not the goal, is to squat down, have both knees do the same thing. No, knees should do the opposite things.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the theme of athletic motion golf, is like you see these 2D images sometimes and you try to reverse engineer them the wrong way, where you just try to kind of get into a squat. Well, you got to realize that happens because of the motion of the knees.
Right.
So the left one's bent, the right one's a little straighter. Now the left one's going to straighten, and the right one eventually will catch up to it, so they're about the same.
Right.
Kind of gives the look of a squat, but remember, you're just passing through that spot. And I want to make another key point here is, we have a lot of golfers come in lately, and they're trying to keep this leg locked back. The problem with that is when you keep that leg back, it actually straightens through the hip, or it stays straight. It doesn't allow you to get this bend. So you can't be afraid to let this part of your trail leg here, this quad, upper part of your trail leg, come into the hitting area. Now, yes, you're right.
Let's see that from face on.
Yeah.
That's a massively important point.
Yeah, this is a big deal here to start getting open. So as this one is, my hip is over my knee, is over my foot, let's say, at impact, right? The trail leg, we like to see this part of the leg here, this femur, or quad, however you want to say it, get pretty vertical right here. And to get that look correctly, you have to let this leg release into this area. Now, yes, you're coming off the wall with the right side of your rear end, so people are very nervous about that, right? It's an early extension. It's really not, because when you do that, you got to remember there's a left side of your pelvis too. And that one has to go around and beyond this side of the wall.
Yes.
So by doing that, it allows the hips to open correctly, and you don't get early extension. You get so much benefit from that, and your pelvis gets as open as it needs to be to hit good shots.
Your left leg is literally an anchor in the golf swing.
Right, trail leg, yeah.
Trail leg, left leg.
Yeah.
Right. This leg is the anchor in the golf swing.
Exactly.
So when you're coming down, if I throw anchor and lock this leg up, that's going to lock the hip up, all for the most flexible humans out there. For most of us, that's going to lock this hip up, and you're not going to get open. You got to let this leg move so this hip can move. And when we're measuring sway in the golf swings, I know a lot of golfers are trying to get their pelvis down. We're measuring the center, so I'm making sure that my center of my pelvis is moving forward, not just my left hip moving down the fairway. Because again, that keeps you from being able to move the knees correctly, which will keep you from being able to open quickly.
100% correct.
So we have a drill for that.
Yeah, we do.
What is it?
You do it.
Do it right? So I'm going to walk myself through all these stages, right?
Okay.
I'm going to lower, I'm going to make sure my spine's neutral.
Yeah.
Then as this club's kind of reaching my waist, I've got to make sure that I'm off this back foot, getting off this back foot and onto my left foot, so my foot can bank in and I can roll and I can get to this open and anchor free, pull anchor right? Lift the anchor out of the ground instead of drop an anchor right there.
That makes a good point. I'll just add to that. It was really good. So, the way we help people learn this, you want to feel like you lighten the trail side.
Have to lighten the trail side.
If you just get in there and feel like, okay, I'm halfway down here, I'm in a good spot. If you wanted to do, add on to Mike's little drill there, if I put my hands here at waist high, I don't even need a ball here, but if I feel like from here, I get heavier in my lead foot by pushing and lighten my trail foot, that leg will come in here a little bit, let the heel come up off the ground. And when I do that, that'll put the knees in about the right spot.
And do that again. You're going to keep the left hip up here.
Yeah.
So he's bringing the right hip to where the left hip is from this face-on view. He's not backing the left hip up to rotate the hips, which we see every day.
That's a huge point. So put that there again. So what Mike's saying is, this is a dress. I've got about a fist.
Right.
I've closed the gap in the delivery position here. This leg starts to straighten. I stay on this one and let the right one come around to match.
That's moving his center of his pelvis forward.
We see a lot of golfers, they think, okay, now I got to open. They keep this planted and they spin the left backwards. That's a recipe for disaster. That gets the club tipping out too much and you start hitting these swipes, which is no
Pulls or
good.
swipes, or it's not good. You're right. So those are the 4 steps to legitimately tour-like get your body open. None of those are predicated on you being super flexible, super young, or super thin even. You do those 4 movements, you do them in order, right? You make sure you take them off in order. You will get your pelvis, you will be more open at impact.